Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside Sales Enablement Season 3, Enablement History. And here in the Orchestrate Sales Studios with me is the irrepressibly optimistic, I love those two words together, Stu Heinecke. And not Heineke. I think the first couple of times I shot a video, it rhymed with totality. And Dale pulled me aside. He's like, Eric, it's Heinecke. So I finally got that right. And Heinecke works with irrepressibly optimistic. So I'll never get it wrong from here on out. So Stu, if you don't know him, and I don't know how you don't, if you're in any of my circles, is a best-selling business author, a marketer, and a creative, a Wall Street Journal cartoonist. His first book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, introduced the concept of contact marketing and is in the top 64, I love that specific number, sales books of all time. His latest release, How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed, lays out a complete model for explosive business growth based on strategies, attributes, and tools that weeds use to grow, expand, and dominate and defend their turf. He's twice nominated as a Hall of Fame marketer. He's a NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center author in residence and named the father of contact marketing by the American Marketing Association. Final note, which is personal to me, he lives on a beautiful island in Puget Sound, Washington, which is where I grew up going. My grandma lived on the cliff in one of those military bunkers that was just off the base. So
Really?
I love his expression. Like, I thought maybe I could throw you a
What?
little bit of a curveball, right? And so, Stu, anything I might have missed in that introduction before we go on?
No, that's perfect. That was a great job. And you see my background. This is not WE.E.D.S, that's AI. So,
Love
but
it.
you were talking specifically about WE.E.D.S.
Yeah. I would
What's
say
going
not
on?
on Whidbey itself. I've been there a bunch.
Hmm.
So I was in that area. We were literally on the cliff of Puget Sound in Port Townsend.
Oh, sweet.
So, but I know
Beautiful little
that whole
town.
area, and it's so neat and so perfect that
Gosh,
you come from that neck of the woods. It's so
that's a
gorgeous up there.
small world. That's amazing.
It
Yeah,
is.
well,
It
thank you.
is.
Yes, that was a great introduction, and yeah, you did get my attention. What? Wait, where?
You
Really?
did right. Come on. So I do have a question, and in going through your books, I love the personification of weeds, which are seen as these pests, and I love it. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and boy, have you found the beauty in weeds. I encourage everyone to go into this world. It's so well documented. Even the pictures at the beginning of each chapter, I got immersed in because I was like, okay, what's Stu going to do with this one? But help me out when I'm so OCD. When I saw W.E.E.D.S, I wanted it to stand for something. Did I miss it? Like, do each of
Oh,
those
yeah, it
letters?
does. Yeah. It's
Okay.
weed-inspired enterprise expansion and domination strategies. It fits perfectly with chief productivity officers and chief weed officers.
There you go. So, hey,
Yeah.
maybe we can start there. Let's mix it up. We got Stu on the call, right? So, you not directly involved with the Sales Enablement Society, but we had a nice pre-call conversation around there has been an evolution and a recognition that sales enablement didn't quite hit the mark. Revenue enablement's closer. And this whole idea of a chief productivity officer really resonated with you through that weeds lens. Talk to me a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, I just thought that was what an interesting evolution of the enablement role, because if you look at it, let's say if you look at it from the standpoint of weeds, and I said in How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed that I expect that there will be a new title in the C-suite, and that would be Chief Weed Officer. And of course, I'm playing around with it. I'm not playing around with the weeds, but
Yeah.
I'm serious as well, because because if you look at the model that weeds use, that's exactly what we need. Really, what it turns you into is a chief growth officer, probably. But it incorporates more than more than sales, I was going to say just sales. Sales is so critical, but it's like saying sunshine and rain are critical, but for the growth of plants. But you have to have the DNA, the stuff that actually grows as well. You've got to create and support that as well. So sales is a big part of it, but there's that whole stuff, that whole category of stuff. And if you think about it, weeds. Well, I'll just describe them this way. Weeds deal with what is. That's a mindset thing. They deal with whatever comes their way, and they do it expertly and with aggression and resilience and adaptability, and I would say even optimism. They just go for it. So, but they deal with what is. They never do anything without an unfair advantage. They
Mm,
never do anything alone. They always focus on what makes them win, and they thrive best in disrupted ground. So if we
mm,
follow the example of weeds, then we're really then and I would love it if weed strategy became a part of the platform for that new evolution, because dealing with what is about mindset. It's about having a fierce mindset, and so it's not enough that we might have one, or that the business owner might have one, or the chief revenue officer might have one. It has to be spread throughout the organization. We all have to deal that, or I mean, operate that way, and then never doing anything without an unfair advantage is. I find that part fascinating, because if you look at what weeds have, I mean, just look at a dandelion. That's a really simple example of it. And look at this. Look at how their seeds are designed and what they do, as compared to, let's say, acorns or pine cones or any seeds. Actually, just about any seed. Um, and so, because they're held aloft in those geodesic domes of seed pods, I mean, that's really an enablement function right there, actually, because they
yeah,
hold them up high. They give them they actually expose them maximally to the wind. And because they're up high and they're exposed to the wind in that way, it gives them that lift they need well, they could be flying for miles. There's some weeds that have seeds that fly up to 300 miles. So, but they have to get up in the air first. So,
right.
so that's interesting. But I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, their seeds operate very differently from other plants, and so as a result, those seeds probe every possible opportunity to take root. I'm talking about things that are very entrepreneurial,
Yeah, I
and
love
I
it.
would say aspirational for business.
And I love where you're headed with that. And so I'd like to me at least, when I read the book, I'm thinking about it through the lens of being an entrepreneur, of an individual, and how they're growing their business like a weed, right? So taking a click back from that, the supporting cast of a weed, and that you go into a lot of detail in the book about how weeds don't have a brain, but they have a very clear plan and they just execute. What is it like to assist? I don't use sales anymore. I say customer facing frontline. When I think of revenue enablement, anyone that touches the customer. If you are growing an overall enterprise like a weed, how does an enablement person best, and maybe using some of the different weed analogies, enable the weed to succeed?
Well, I think I go right back to that model. I think that enablement could have a role in instilling the right mindset and in creating competitive advantages. I mean, that's constant. I mean,
Right,
someone needs to be in charge of that, I think. And the CEO generally is. The CEO is in charge of everything.
right,
So taking over some specific roles, being being in charge of cultivating the unfair advantages you already have, but then also new ones, is, I would think, I mean, that's critical, because how else do you don't create revenue without them. In fact, the company doesn't grow, and it certainly doesn't survive without those unfair advantages, those creative. And by unfair, I don't mean actually unfair or, let's say, illegal. I'm
right,
just saying, I sort of that I want our competitors to be saying, well, that's not fair, because they can't compete. That's what we want. We want advantages that our competitors can't match. And then going further through that model, weeds never do anything alone. They don't. I mean, if you see a weed show up, if you see a dandelion show up in your lawn, look up and you will see that, because it never shows up alone, right? So
Right.
look up and you'll see hundreds of, at least dozens, if not hundreds of other dandelions. They're all pumping out 15,000 seeds per plant. You're not going to get rid of them. But if it was just one weed, well, I mean, if it was one dandelion, I should say, it's not a factory. Just pull it out. You're done. So collaborations, huge, huge part of enabling revenue and growth.
Love it.
And it might be that growth is the key word as opposed to revenue, even.
Mm.
But that certainly is a huge factor in enabling growth. What kinds of collaborations can you create out in the marketplace? And that's critical. So that, and then I mentioned that they never do anything, or sorry, that they focus on what makes them win. What I'm really talking about is process. And in the W.E.E.D.S case, process is evolution. I think it is in our case as well. But how does when we map process across an organization, what we're doing is mapping, I don't want to call them best practices, but the expertise, the accumulated expertise
Tribal
throughout the
knowledge.
organization, across the organization, so that everybody in the organization operates as an expert. And that's critical. And that is what W.E.E.D.S do as well. I mean, but that's just baked into their DNA, and they have such a fast growth cycle. I mean, particularly if these are annual plants, the whole population dies out every year. And all of the evolution, let's say the evolutionary R&D goes into the seeds. It's built into the seeds. The seeds are what can continue the species. And through that process, God, they evolve around things like Roundup.
Right.
Very,
Who
very
knew you could do
toxic stuff.
that?
It wasn't
Yeah.
around. Their process is millions of years old, but we just came out with. I mean, we just started hitting them with glyphosate, and there's one weed that evolved around it in 4 years. So,
Crazy.
and then that immunity is just built into the entire species from that point on. So that, I don't want to get too far into the weeds. Sorry, I don't want to
No,
play with
that's
it.
great.
But I mean certainly process is a big one, and mapping it across the entire organization and thinking of it as evolution is really, I think, a thing that ought to be a function of whoever is chief growth officer or whoever is chief productivity officer. And I think finally, the fact that they thrive best, and this is actually true, they thrive best in disrupted ground because it's virgin ground all of a sudden. And a good analogy is our yards and our gardens are disrupted ground. I mean, we're the ones that disrupt it. I mean, humankind does. So wherever we expose the ground, what shows up first? Weeds, because they're perfectly evolved to do that. So how do we build that into our organizations? How do we surf the wave of disruption in
How
our
do we run
markets?
into the chaos and get into that fertile ground?
How do we thrive because of the chaos? I mean, one of the things that's just plentiful here is in our lives is chaos. I mean, look at it right now. It's just chaos. But how do you engineer an organization that thrives because of it? And so I think all of those things should be part of that mission, part of that chief productivity officer mission.
Love it. And so I'll backtrack a little bit. The second is talking about essentially a business within a business. Orchestrating, that's the Orchestrate sales here, a cross-functional business within a business. And one of my favorite collaboration stories in the book is about trees that collaborate and communicate when giraffes start to nibble on their leaves, not just next to each other, but across an entire. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe some other analogies in the W.E.E.D world to that cross-functional collaboration. And in enablement terms, it's knocking down silos, having a seat at all the cross-functional tables in order to drive growth. But I think that's an awesome example.
And when I wrote the book, I was and was writing about collaboration. I was focused externally. So it's who can we collaborate with outside of the organization to grow it? But certainly that same spirit of collaboration needs to exist within the organization. I mean, if imagine an organization where no collaboration is happening.
Oh,
It's
there's some.
dysfunctional. It's not going to go anywhere. Well, you asked about that story. It was acacia trees, and they emit something into the air, a trace chemical into the air, and that tells the rest of the trees that they're under attack, and they're able to. This is a odd thing. You just look at trees; they look like rocks, and weeds. Plants, they just look like rocks, like nothing's happening, but a lot's happening. And so that triggers the rest of the trees to release a chemical into their leaves that makes them bitter or taste bitterly to the giraffes. So the giraffes bite into a couple of trees, and then they say, well, this one sucks. And then they go to the rest of the trees and they all suck. Now, I want to talk, if I may,
Yeah.
Amazon has disruption parties. And so they'll buy pizzas for their teams, and the teams that they go to work figuring out how to disrupt their own business. And I think that's incredible, right? I mean, what a great exercise to go through for the company, but also for the employees. All of it, actually, all of it makes so much
Yeah.
sense. And because of that, I mean, they're probably their own biggest source of disruption. That's fantastic. It's a great way to surf disruption. If you're the disruptive force.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite examples is when you talk about Kindle cannibalizing the bookstore, they did it all right in their own frigging campus.
Yeah, but then look what happened. Everyone, people, I mean, I got to tell you, yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people will tell me, I bought your book. It's usually how to get a meeting with anyone, but I bought your book. And because I bought it as an audiobook or as a Kindle. But I found that I wanted to write notes, and well, I guess you can kind of make notations in the Kindle,
Yeah.
but basically you
I,
wanted to, yeah, you
I was
wanted
just having this
to have a
conversation
yellow
with a
marker.
friend before I was going. It's like, you have the hard copy books. I go, and the M and the Audible and the right. I'm like, I
Yeah,
need to hold it in my hand too.
yeah, because well, that's what I was hearing was that from readers, whether I was listening to it in the car, let's say, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I had to pull over. I wanted to write stuff down, and I realized I just have to get the book.
Bingo.
So actually, it doesn't cannibalize it.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I love the self-disruption. How many companies will wreck their own status quo? I mean, we talk a ton about Dupree stands for, right? Let's go after the sales status quo. And in fact,
Yeah.
speaking of, part of the reason that I've got you on the podcast is our mutual friend, Dale Dupree himself. I have a kind of chicken or the egg question, right? So, contact marketing. You are the father, but how when did Dale Dupree and Stu Heinecke cross paths? Was it pre-book, post-book? When did that all
Oh,
occur?
yeah.
And who is the chicken and who is the egg and who inspired who maybe along the way?
There might be a chicken and egg thing going on, but my first experience with contact marketing was using my cartoon. You mentioned I'm one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists. I've been using cartoons in direct mail, and have been nominated a couple of times to the halls of fame, some different halls of fame for marketing, for my work with cartoons and personalization in the mail. And it's always been a great device. And I used it to launch my business, my first business, to break through. And then I got really interested in, like, well, if I could break through to the people I just broke through to, all these absolutely critical decision makers, and they helped me launch my business because they took my call, and then they met with me and they became clients. But I was just curious, well, what's everyone else doing? How are they getting meetings? And what I discovered was, I mean, although AMA was kind enough to call me the father of contact marketing, I'm the father of the term, but I so far this goes back as far as Leonardo da Vinci, working with the one of the De Medici family members. The De Medici family member got in touch with Leonardo. This is kind of like somebody getting in touch with me or Dale now, I guess, because he said, "I want it. Would you design something that would be a gift that I could present to the Count of Milan, because I'd like to introduce myself?" So Leonardo came up with the horsehead flute, not flute, lute, a stringed instrument that is based on the skull of a horse.
Mm.
And that was the gift that they presented. And not only did obviously it got it got the Medici family member through to the count,
Yeah.
but Leonardo also figured into that. But they all became lifelong friends from that point on. What I was discovering as I was interviewing a lot of the great thought leaders in sales, and I'm asking them, when you need to get through to, when you absolutely have to break through to someone of great importance, someone who can change your scale, how are you doing it? What I realized is there's this whole shadow form of marketing. And I kept asking, what's this called? Didn't have a name, so I had to name it something in the book, and I named it contact marketing. Dale is one of those people who fits directly into all this. And he's part of, there's a movement actually that he and I are both tapped into. And I mean, given the fact that Leonardo was part of it, it's hundreds of years old now. And so the fact is that people have just done the most outrageously audacious things to get meetings, clever things to get meetings. And Dale, I mean, I'm a big fan of Dale's. We were introduced on LinkedIn, and we were part of the same LinkedIn pod. But I knew him when he was still selling copiers.
Oh my
But
goodness.
he would drop by with, life-size cutouts of himself, whatever. He just knew that he
Yeah.
had needed to give them a different experience than they were getting from everyone else, because otherwise he's selling a commodity. And so he had to differentiate himself. He was right on the money. We're doing this now because we're going to get together. It's next week for Totality, and that's Dale's event with the Sales Rebellion. I'm so excited to be part of it. But Dale does some really, really clever things with donut boxes and all these things. You think, with what? you know,
We saw in the book mention of a sword. Was that a shout out to the copier warrior and the swords he used?
that was to Dan Waldschmidt.
Okay.
Dan does a really cool thing. So he was one of the people I interviewed. He was one of the top sales bloggers. I don't know that he's still doing it. He had a blog called Edgy Conversations. He's an amazing guy. He falls into this category that I'm trying to sort of fall into now, because he's quite entrepreneurial, and he's an ultra competitive athlete. He's a turnaround specialist. That's how he makes money. So he described his process for reaching CEOs of companies that have just announced missed earnings estimates.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he does when he finds one of those stories is he has a sword made up by the prop maker who made all the swords for the movie Gladiator. So they're beautiful swords. And he has the CEO's name engraved on the blade. And then it goes into this beautiful wooden box with a handwritten note. There's no logos on anything. Everyone thinks that's brand. Well, it is kind of branding, but logos don't belong in this stuff generally. And so it's just a handwritten note.
Interesting.
And he's saying, look, business is war, and I noticed you lost a battle recently. I just wanted to let you know, if you ever need a few extra hands in battle, I've got your back. He's getting 100% response rate to that. And I know Dale
Awesome.
and some of his clients are also experiencing that. That's actually it's not all that uncommon in contact marketing. Contact marketing is it is the most bizarre from a marketing I'm aware of. I mean, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it's not unusual to come across stories of 100% response rates. And the highest one that I know of is in excess of 300%.
Yeah.
The highest ROI that I'm aware of is 69,500,000%. Or in other words, a $20 million result from a $28 ad placed in Facebook.
So on that note, if I remember correctly, you're working on a new edition of this very book we're speaking of.
Yeah.
Can you give us a peek behind the curtain? What are some of the cool things, not too much of a spoiler alert, that they can expect in the second edition that they're gonna have to buy a physical copy if they haven't already?
Yeah, well, buy the Kindle version and the audio version first, and then
and then get the third. Yeah.
Actually, if you buy it at all, I'm grateful beyond words. So whatever you might do, that's wonderful. Well, so here's the thing: How to Get a Meeting with Anyone came out in 2016, and it really did well. And it really focuses on, well, what are the things you can do to stand out to someone that is otherwise inundated with, I don't know, people trying to pitch them and trying to get in touch with them, and there are all kinds of really wonderful things that you can do to do that. But things started to change about getting meetings. We've all noticed the fact that we went through the pandemic and work from home, and some people haven't really returned to the office. So when everyone was working out of the office, we knew exactly where to send things. It wasn't hard to if you were going to send something physical, you knew exactly where to send things. Now it's not quite so clear. Just where do you send if you're going to send something physical? And I love sending things that are physical because not many people are doing that. I mean, it's an uncrowded channel, so use it. And then we've just had this deluge of spam in our inboxes and on our phones, so we don't answer our phones anymore. So it's harder to get through that way. And then finally, the big one, the big kicker is AI. When you mention AI to people, they have a few, they fall into sort of two different categories. The first one is just absolute fear. Oh my God, it's going to take my job. It's going to replace me and everyone else. It's going to be the end of humanity. I don't happen to subscribe to that. So the other group that I'm thinking of, they're saying, well, hang on, what does it allow us to do? What is it? I mean, wow, look at that. That's amazing. Oh, and it's doing that now too. Oh my gosh. Now suddenly I'm an illustrator or a photographer or a movie maker or videographer or a voiceover talent, et cetera. I mean, it does create great extensions. It's a lot of fun, but it also creates great extensions and new advantages for sellers. I mean, I think it's miraculous for sellers. I don't see it replacing sellers, but you better be leaning into it. Look, AI allows us to do incredible things as sellers now. I mean, but just being able to find people based on our ICP, I mean, our ideal customer profiles and trigger events and buyer intent signals, all those things, those are incredible. There is also an equal and opposite reaction against AI. So I think that people are going to be more and more impressed by things that an AI couldn't possibly do. Only talented humans with perhaps practiced hands of dog. I'm thinking about cartoons when I'm saying this, but
Right.
but cartoons are one of them. AI doesn't do cartoons well, thank God. Not yet, at least, but maybe it'll never take it over because cartooning is about the voice of the cartoonist as well. So I mean, the cartoonists have fans. AI is not going to develop fans, I don't think. But cartoonists, people know who Roz Chast is or Bob Mankoff, and so it's also the cartoonist's voice. They're commentators on life. And so those things are very human, and they will be, I would say, anything that's very human and uniquely based in talent is going to be the new luxury. So all of that combined that's the update to the book. It's how do you deal with all that? But I think any problem that any of us have when we're writing about AI is that it changes very, very quickly. The point here is to lean into it and really, really just keep discovering what it can do and playing with it. So that's the update.
It reminds me of, I was just reading Mark Cosaglo, who's launching a new company, Operator.ai. They're calling it the Great Ignore, which I think is a great name for it.
That's a great way to put it.
The question I was going to ask, I think you really just answered, like in that noise, right? And in the AI, what is going to differentiate? And it sounds like, to me, the answer is contact marketing. And it's the emphasis on human contact marketing.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about empathy these days, but truly empathetically, which is another thing AI lacks, right? At least not in completeness as of yet.
So far, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That how do you meet someone where they are? Another buzzword / sentence these days. You've got to have empathy. And how do you show that empathy? Man, if you can show up either literally with an empty box of donuts, if you're Dale, right?
Yeah.
Or even in the mail, with something that shows that you're paying attention. You're there. Look at that, right? Even a handwritten note.
This is one of the devices that we're using. It's a 5x7 card in an envelope, and there's a window cut in the envelope, so you see a crop of a cartoon. In this case, it's a pissed off butterfly.
Yeah, I love it.
But you don't know what it is until you open it up, pull it out. There's the rest of the cartoon. And now, Eric, if I was sending this to you, Well, I'd be sending it because you delayed something. I mean, that would be the point of sending this particular cartoon. So, here he is, the pissed off butterfly on the phone. He's talking to you or leaving you a message actually, and
Uh-huh.
he's saying, hey, "Don't put me on hold, Eric. I only have a 2-week lifespan."
That's great.
Right? So, what a great disarming way of saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
Eric, you're hanging me up." Right?
Love it.
But okay, so that's cool. But then when you open it up, there's a handwritten note in there,
Perfect.
except that it's not handwritten. It's actually done with automation and a computer plotter and a font that has different cases. I mean, different versions of every letter, and they're randomized in there. So it writes with a ballpoint pen, and it comes out looking like that.
It literally puts a
So
ballpoint pen down.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So when someone gets that, they're going to go, "Oh my God." Well, first of all, and like if you sent me that and you were asking me to be on the podcast, let's say, I don't know, I'm not sure what I was holding you up on, but let's call it that. And I got the card. I'd be going, "Well, first of all, that's hilarious. Thank you." I
Right.
mean, look at this butterfly. And he's right. He only has a 2-week lifespan. So there's that. But then I open it up, and there's a note from you that you hand wrote, and you signed it and all that. You hand addressed the outer envelope, put a stamp on it. And I'm going, well, if I got that in the mail, I don't see those very often. People don't
Right.
write cards to each other anymore. So when you see one, it really stands out. Just that makes it stand out.
Yeah.
But getting the whole thing, one of the things that would happen is you're going to look at it, and your reaction, I don't know if you'll even think of this consciously, but your reaction will be, this couldn't possibly have come from an AI.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's what
It
I'm
sounds a
talking
little
about.
bit.
That's the effect. So it's not like, well, you should be a good listener. You should be a good conversationalist, right? I mean, you got to do all that stuff. But how do you demonstrate that empathy and authenticity? I mean, you can't just say, "Well, I'm authentic and I have empathy." You've got to like reach out to them and make them laugh, for example.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so that's one example. Now, Dale has this really cool device that I don't know whether he goes and eats the donuts, but but he orders a dozen donuts and then takes them all out and then writes a note on the lid inside the lid saying, "Hey, I got these to celebrate our deal together, but it never came. I got to waiting so long. They ate all the donuts. I'm really sorry." And so you see all the crumbs,
Yeah.
and the grease
Yeah.
stains from the donuts. And then yeah, then here's a card and let's why
Let's
don't we,
celebrate signing.
yeah. Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
do
yeah.
it.
That's right. To celebrate the sign.
Yeah.
That's
Let's
right.
do this. Let's
And
get
so,
together.
yeah, I mean, that's a really cool, again, no AI popped that
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
right?
I love it.
So
And
that's a
and
really cool
so
thing.
so a couple things there. One, I think you might be talking about Scribeless. They're one of the sponsors for Totality. And speaking of, I know I've witnessed firsthand. Dale does have a special way he gets those boxes, but if I told you, I'd have to not drag you to Totality. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think you need to come to Totality. And if you didn't see the card, I've got another one that I'm going to bring. I'm
awesome.
going to show that thing off. And I'm not going to just come to Totality. I know there's, I think, like a dozen tickets left.
About,
So,
yep.
I don't know when this is. I don't know when this is releasing, but if it's releasing,
ASAP.
what's that? Oh, good,
ASAP.
good. Yeah,
Yesterday.
yeah, good. Then get your tickets. Join us. We are going to
Yes.
have an absolute blast. This will be the first time or Dale and I have ever met in person. But I'm going to say this. I'm like, there are going to be so many people there. I can't wait to be in the room with them because there are a lot of people that Dale and I both know. Well, Dale knows them a lot because they're I think, part of the sales rebellion as well. But he and I both know them through LinkedIn and
Mhm.
through a lot of their audacious things that they've been doing. And that people in the room have been doing some really cool things. And one of my favorite things to do, I don't know if I'll even get a chance to do it, but is to ask people, does anyone have a surefire method for breaking through? And they'll probably tell me about a lot of Dale's stuff, the crumpled letter and the donut box. But you never know. You hear great stories.
Awesome.
People have got great stories. And this group is like, these are the all-stars. This is
Yeah.
going to be incredible to be in that room with them.
Yeah, at all levels, from individual
Yeah.
contributor to founders. And so maybe that's a great place to land, I think, Stu. Can you tell folks a little bit about, but part of what I love about this conference is it is talking heads be damned, right? It's not going to be a show up and throw up PowerPoint slides. It's an experience. I can't wait to meet and experience you in totality, Stu. Can you share just a little bit of what that might look like and what folks are going to have the opportunity to do with you in that room where it happened?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, I'm going to be there for 3 days. So
Awesome.
I'm there for the there are 2 days plus, I think, the VIP experience on the third day. So
Yes.
I'm there for all 3 days. I'm sure going to have unbelievable conversations, just private or like just a group of us, all these different conversations about what everyone's doing. It's just going to be an incredible brainstorming session. I think just that'll just be the vibe of the place. But
Mhm.
I'm doing a workshop, and it's only it's less than an hour long. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be creating. You're going to be create. Anyone who's in there is going to be creating new contact campaigns. And I can't wait to see what comes out of that. That's just going to be a blast. And I think we'll turn it into a contest or a competition. And there'll be people will be seated at different tables. And yeah, it's going to be so they'll form teams. And I don't know what the winning team gets, but we'll figure
Yeah.
that out. It's just going to be a lot
We
of
can't.
fun. And
Dale's
and
got a
then
lot of tricks up his sleeve. I'll tell you that, Stu.
yeah, yeah, he'll inject a lot of great stuff into this.
Yeah.
And I know sorry, Saturday, which is the third day. So it's Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday. Saturday we're taking a hike. I don't know where we're going, but I love hiking, so I'm totally down for that.
And there
And that'll
might
be
be a
nice.
gourmet chef involved on the trail.
Oh, that's going to be
So
great.
don't want to
Wow,
spoil too much, but Dale does it right,
he's
man.
doing it right. That's for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. And so
absolutely.
I don't think anyone knows where they're supposed to go yet. It's part of the
And
experience. You get there and you'll find out.
so, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen who have been bugging Dale and already have your tickets, even Stu doesn't know where he's going.
I'm
It's
just
going to
flying
be,
there.
yeah,
I'm
it's
flying to
just
Knoxville, and I don't know what happens after that.
get into the zip code and Dale's going to take it from there. I'll tell you that much. I can't wait. We're going to be not Orchestrate Sales, Inside Sales, but the Selling Local podcast is going to be broadcasting live. So be sure to tune in to them, to the Sales Rebellion's Selling Local. You'll hear Stu, I know, and from a little bit of everybody live and thereafter in a multi-episode. So we're going to be capturing some of it, but there's nothing like the experience of being there. Stu's going to be there all 3 days. I didn't know that. That's awesome to hear. You're going to be, this is the caliber of folks you're going to be bumping elbows with in the hallways and having the opportunity to talk to. So, Stu, thank you so much. You do have a new edition of How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, which is such a bullseye for the enablement community. Anyone in the listening audience who doesn't have the book already, you're about to really have no excuse when the next edition comes out.
Yeah, I can give you the exact date, although I don't know the time, but
I might be there at that exact time.
It's going to be June 3rd next year.
Purchase the book, like and follow him on LinkedIn. The wrap it up with the bow is talk to me as the every enablement person. I know that through the How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed, you can actually get certified, right, as a chief growth officer, or at least a consultant in the space. What's the equivalent of how enablement can engage you to help their folks get a meeting with anyone?
Well, we also offer certification for getting meetings as well. So that would be the way to. So you can go to my site, stuheinecke.com, STUHEINECKE. So drop by my site. You can join my list. You can then get the first two chapters of How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed. I had no idea until we had this conversation, Eric, how much weed strategy absolutely applies to this new mission of the enablement movement. That's incredible. So
Absolutely.
I'd love to have more conversations about that. But also, and of course, thank you for buying the books. That's wonderful. You can also link with me on LinkedIn. But I would love it if you come to the Totality show next week.
Awesome.
That's the best way to link up.
We're probably down to about 7 to 10 of you can still get a ticket. So get it It's worth it. Take the cross-country trip if you need to. Just get there. It's a grand. If it's not, by the time you get there, look me up or Stu. We'll get you a discount to get it back down to that. And we're talking hotel room included for a couple of day event. It's unheard of. Just get yourself there, and Dale's going to take care of you and the rest of the sales rebellion from there. So, Stu, I can't wait to meet you in person. This was such a gift to me. I've been excited to cross paths with you in this way for years. Now, not only do I get to have you here on the podcast and share you with the listening enablement global community, I get to meet you face to face, as well as hopefully a few more of you that are listening. Stu, thanks so much for your time, for all that you do. I'm in weed mode, thanks to you. And I can't wait to learn even a few more ways to get a meeting with anyone, because the father of contact marketing is here, and he's about to even share a little bit more. And I can't wait to get my hands on that.
Well, hey, I can. There's a lot to share, and I can't wait to be in the room with everyone. There'll be a lot to share among everyone. Hey, thank you so much for having me on, and I just look forward to seeing you next week.
Outstanding. Thanks, Stu. We'll see you in totality.